And again, thank you, Anna, for the intro. For those who haven't heard or seen me before, again, my name is Troy Johnston. As Anna alluded to, I've worn a few hats in this space. I've been a brand owner. I got started on Amazon in about 2014. Stumbled my way through, like many successful, or let alone any seller, any Amazon seller. I've got a trunk full of products. I've had a garage full of products, failed products, but sort of failed my way through before building out a brand that I like to think was ultimately successful before realizing an exit. I've been a consultant for other FBA brands in my network in fairly competitive categories. It's really served me well to stay in categories that you can think of, like supplements on Amazon, health and beauty, often saturated, often very competitive. But having that as part of my experience very early on really served me to stay sort of in the deep end, what was on the bleeding cutting edge of what works on Amazon, and how that informed a lot of my decisions in my own businesses. And so moving on from consulting, I connected with other Amazon sellers to spin up, as Anna very nicely says, one of the best solutions, SaaS solutions in seller.tools. As an owner and operator, really seeing and trying to inject that unique perspective of being a seller myself, scratching our own itch, really developing tools that we've always wanted and did want in our business. That was our ethos, and it really carried through in terms of the suite of tools that we ultimately developed. And then my role today is advisor, M&A advisor, effectively for Carbon 6, is really to cobble all of that experience and knowledge together and sort of get a lay of the land and identify ways in which we can acquire different solutions and tools for Amazon and e-commerce sellers, generally e-commerce sellers, to be able to isolate those opportunities, to evaluate shared objectives, and to realize those acquisitions in my capacity. And it's a really fun, as is the case in really all of these roles and capacity, it's a really fun sandbox to play in. So with that background, a little bit about me, I want to take my short time with you today to really talk about sort of higher level thinking. This isn't going to be very tactical. This is really more, how do you develop a North Star in your business to where you're making consistently good decisions? And it really is a guide. I think that North Star analogy is really fitting for what I had in mind for unpacking and taking, in many ways, a lot of my lessons learned. And it will help you. My hope is that it will help you to think about how to welcome exponential growth in your Amazon business. One of the first and really crucial steps is really being able to embrace what has now become far more popular than it once was, but it really is the idea of systems thinking. If you were to go out and canvas the variety of different Amazon courses right now, one of the really exciting things that you'll see, if you don't stumble upon this organically, is that an Amazon FBA business is fairly formulaic. There is a sequence of steps that have to be completed to be able to ultimately scale and automate. So if we can take the step of implementing systems thinking in a formulaic way, we really can create for ourselves an abundance of additional time and ideally an abundance of additional resources. Now, when it comes to system thinking, it's really important to think about the internal processes in your business. This is sometimes the unsexy stuff. It can be boring, but it allows you as a really good litmus test. If somebody were to walk in one day, walk in your door and say, hey, how is your business run? It would really be clarified by highlighting and sharing with them your processes, wherever that is. If you're using a tool like Notion, if you're using Tranual, there's now an abundance of solutions, again, tactically, to be able to ensure that you're developing and growing your processes. And there's a few things to think in mind here of what a great process looks like. If it's sequential, if it has very clear milestones, so key steps along the way, if there's essential resources that make and ensure that process is done effectively, and a good process really isn't a good process without a clear objective. What does it look like? What's the reality once a task and or project is completed? Creating this predictability in your business, again, allows us to start freeing up that essential time. As I touched on an Amazon FBA business, when we look at sourcing, vetting products and doing initial keyword research, to listing optimizations, to launching, to this sequence of very familiar steps that looking awfully familiar. Organically, this business is very predictable, but when we inject those processes and think from the top down, we inject even more predictability in those processes. Now, it's important for the nuances of your unique use case, your business, your products, everything that is unique to you, to identify and isolate those gaps, whether it's over time or whether this is as you're evaluating, again, bringing a product to market and you're forward thinking, you're isolating those gaps or areas of opportunity. And this can come in a number of different forms. Is it gaps in terms of people? Is it gaps in terms of tools? Is it gaps in terms of resources? It's really important to make sure that all the links in that chain exist and that you determine effectively what is missing. With that, it gives you the ability to really dive in. This is when you get to the place of really doing an 80-20 in your business. And specifically in an Amazon business, if you've heard me talk about this point before, ultimately where you should be spending a bulk of your time, or your team in this case, as you set in more systems and processes and predictability, is that they or you are focusing on ranking and reviews. That is absolutely what Amazon rewards. It's how you realize on-channel excellence. It's the traffic and conversions. It's the Amazon equivalent of traffic and conversions. We get traffic via social proof, via reviews, and then social proof for conversions, because that social proof translates into conversions and revenue, and then traffic via ranking by getting more visible. Organic rank is the top of the mountain on Amazon. So when we marry those two, do those right, and have predictability in our business, we get to really dedicate that focus and attention on those high impact areas. And this is where, again, we've got the latitude to welcome some high level decision making. One of the analogies I always like to give here is that up and slightly removed. This has been popularized in systems thinking, but what I always like to share is this idea at cocktail parties, or if you're networking, you're at an Amazon event, more often than not, you find that you can give really great advice. You can give people really cool insights, and you can sort of surprise yourself. More often than not, that's usually you just taking on that perspective where you're up, slightly removed, and seeing the lay of the land, seeing the whole board, and making better and more informed decisions. And that's why it's important to sort of first get your systems and processes locked in, and then welcome the ability to take full advantage of this high level decision making. Now, how are the different ways that this can show up? This is sort of the homework. I'm gonna share this as ideas that you can start unpacking, reading the right type of content and books, and really thinking about different ways that you can pull some of these big levers. Again, this is what I'm focusing on now with Carbon 6 on the M&A side of things, but let's explore a few of these topics together. So JVs, joint ventures, this is a great way, and one of the ways that you can work with a potential strategic partner, even potential competitors, to collaborate in such a way where there is mutual benefit. What are some of your pain points? Where are there some shared objectives? Where are some conversations, meaningful conversations that can take place where it is ultimately a win-win? In that same spirit, when you look at M&A, which culminates in both the idea of mergers. So is there a way that you can blend companies and organizations, or looking at acquisition? And obviously this can take the form of the acquisition of your brand, but also the acquisition that you can utilize, pull that lever for acquiring other companies, other assets that would be synergistic and part of your ultimate goals. Same with strategic partnerships. Now, if I were to roll those three up and give you maybe a really important takeaway for today, is pulling out something like your P&L. Look at where your expenses are going. Look at where you're generating the most income. What are showing up in those line items that you can optimize, that you can partner or accelerate? More often than not, where you're already doing can be very eye-opening to where you can focus some of the efforts on these biggest levers, and think about quick wins. This is again where tools really shine. SaaS solutions can often get ahead of what are your biggest expenses. More often than not, that shows up in things like payroll, paying for people power, can be a great investment, but there may be opportunities for you to shave a 40, 50, $60,000 salary and be able to automate through a SaaS solution. But really, that requires you to dive into your P&L, look and see where those cost saves may lie, and explore where there may be some opportunities from the tool end of the spectrum all the way up to seeking out and exploring strategic partnerships. And then last but not least, restructuring. This is really where you start to think about when you have that slightly up and slightly removed perspective for that high level decision making, is giving yourself the latitude of not thinking you have to do the same thing every single day. That type of predictability may show up in your processes, but it doesn't need to show up in your high level decision making. That's really where you want to be in your business as a owner, removing yourself maybe from the operations. And this is where I use this phrase in this light, the idea of orchestrating massive growth. You want to be the orchestrator, and you don't necessarily want to be the one playing a specific instrument and being key in the sound that comes out. But what you'll notice is these conductors that are leading orchestras can really take on a unique form. Some are more vibrant and are more involved with their different ways that they conduct, and others are more subtle. And that gives you, again, that latitude when you think about a lever like restructuring and again, deploying higher level decision making. So with that, I wanted to give you some ideas again to think about where you can start building up in your business, ultimately getting the core pieces right, creating that predictability, then welcoming that high level decision making, and then doing a little bit of discovery on those different levers that you can pull in your business. And thank you again for your time and attention.